The Verkhovna Rada has ratified a loan agreement with the European Union for 90 billion hryvnias for the years 26 and 27. And this money is supposed to help Ukraine cover its budgetary needs and strengthen its defense. But ratification doesn't mean the money is already in the account. Each tranche will be tied to the fulfillment of specific conditions. One of the most sensitive points is the taxation of cheap international parcels, those same purchases from Temu and AliExpress, as well as other platforms. The Rada has already not supported the relevant changes, and this could create risks for part of the funding. When could the money actually arrive? What could delay the payments, and will every Ukrainian feel it? We will talk about all this with Andriy Novak, the head of the Committee of Economists of Ukraine. Mr. Andriy, welcome.
Yes, hello.
Please tell us, the government is talking about the first payments already in June and mentions a target of 3.2 billion euros. How realistic is this timeline, and what could shift it?
The thing is, specific dates are only announced when they are already known. So you could say it's already a done deal that in June Ukraine will receive a tranche, possibly even two, because the EU funds, which as we know have finally been fully approved and reapproved, and Ukraine has already done its part. Ratification by the Verkhovna Rada, which is the ratification by the country's parliament. Basically, even all the formal barriers have been removed, and now only the procedures are taking effect. First and foremost, these are the EU's own procedures. The 90 billion loan itself, not only is it split over 2 years, 26 and 27, but it is also divided between two main programs. The so-called macro-financial assistance and the Ukraine facility. This is, roughly speaking, they give us money in exchange for reforms. In other words, we implement reforms, and for these reforms, it turns out, we are paid money so that we actually do something. Basically, it's what we should have been doing ourselves all these years of independence. And since we ourselves have done almost nothing, now we are being paid to carry out our own internal reforms for our own benefit. And the second part, the macro-financial assistance, is actually even larger in terms of money. It is primarily aimed at meeting the immediate needs of the budget on the one hand, and on the other hand at replenishing the foreign exchange reserves of the National Bank of Ukraine. That's how these funds are distributed. Then there are technical details, such as which tranche will go to the Ukraine facility or which tranche will go to international macro-financial assistance. These are just technical details. Overall, just to clarify, macro-financial assistance refers to the amounts in the first tranches, which will be roughly twice as large as the reform-linked funds from the Ukraine facility.
I'd like to clarify something here. The fact is that the financing conditions are tied to the rule of law, anti-corruption policy, and budgetary discipline. How realistic is it that in the summer or fall the tranches could be put on hold due to, say, some concerns about the reforms?
You see, no one can just give money for nothing. Like, here, take the money, right? In return, you have to give something. So, in return, Ukraine is essentially required to continue reforms to keep fighting corruption, right? And for these areas, they set, well, the so-called EU standards for us. Since we are moving towards full membership in the EU, since this 90 billion credit is being provided by the EU, in return, they give us a kind of roadmap on how to actually align our legislation with EU law, to implement, let's say, the methods and approaches to fighting corruption used in the EU so that similar mechanisms would work here as well. That's why they set out various lists, compilations of so-called requirements for Ukraine. Fighting corruption, for example, slightly improving the mechanism for appointing the prosecutor general. Plus, that's one of the points. Another point is to improve the mechanism for appointing prosecutors at the local level. Plus, giving more powers to NABU and SAPO. Plus, for NABU and SAPO, greater access to all the data they need to conduct pretrial investigations. In other words, these are technical aspects that have long been standard in the EU, right? We didn't have these standards. And now Ukraine is being required to align its internal legal procedures as well as financial mechanisms, including implementing them according to EU financial procedures, since the EU is giving us money. So there's nothing extravagant about this. There's nothing... Fortunately, we are not being given such direct, well, let's say direct dependencies, like only when you adopt something, only then will you receive some tranche. Fortunately, there is no such direct linkage. Even as you can see, they set conditions for us, well, supposedly conditions. I have always refuted this, that in reality, no one sets things up like that. No one says you have to raise taxes for sole proprietors, right? Do you remember that topic? Because otherwise there would be no EU funds. Are there EU funds? There are. Did we raise taxes for sole proprietors? No. The same applies to all other similar demands.
2 killed and 3 wounded. These are the consequences of 2 morning strikes on Zaporizhia, just a few hours apart. The Russians attacked civilian enterprises with drones, resulting in fatalities. 2 people were wounded during the first strike and another one during the second. In addition to industrial infrastructure, residential buildings were also damaged. The blast wave shattered windows in several apartment buildings, and a balcony in one of the apartments was literally pierced by a drone fragment. Fortunately, there are no residents here at the moment, and neighbors are keeping an eye on the place.
It broke through here, then pierced the balcony wall, and then the wall into the room. I was sitting and having breakfast, and I had just gotten up from the table. Then it just went off with a bang. And well, the glass started falling and all that. And I didn't understand anything at all.
My windows shattered, and that was it. I actually started experiencing a sudden panic attack. And honestly, I just don't even have the words to describe it.
Police officers, rescue workers, and several utility crews arrived at the neighborhood attacked by the Russian drone to cover up the shattered windows as quickly as possible. People whose homes were damaged lined up at the local administration's tent to register their losses for future compensation.
Are there a lot of broken windows? Well, I already have 10 apartments in this building, 10 in that building. So far, 5 have reported, but we'll keep going around to check.
The strike hit the area of 2 or 3 apartment buildings. At the moment, more than 50 apartments have been damaged. This is the initial count. Services are working. We are advising people on how to submit information about the strike to the e-recovery system.
4 people have been wounded in the Kharkiv region just this morning. At dawn, the Russians hit a car in the village of Ryasne, Bohodukhiv district with an FPV drone. As a result of the attack, 2 women were injured. Both have been taken to the hospital. And just a few hours later, in the village of Stepne, also in the Bohodukhiv district, there was a second FPV drone strike on a civilian car. A 21-year-old driver and a 46-year-old female passenger were injured. And yesterday, the Russians killed 2 people and wounded 5 others in the Kharkiv region. As a result of enemy shelling of the village of Bili Kolodias in the Vovchansk community yesterday, a 65-year-old woman and a 46-year-old man were killed. Another person was wounded. 3 more people were also injured in the village of Shestakove, the town of Solokev, and the village of Husinka. In addition, during humanitarian demining in the village of Virnopilia in the Oskil community, a 34-year-old man was wounded. Over the past day, Kharkiv and 18 other settlements in the region came under enemy attacks. The enemy continues to strike the Sumy region. During the day, the air raid siren was silent for only half an hour, according to the regional military administration. A 59-year-old man was killed in the Krasnopilia community as a result of a drone strike. A 47-year-old woman was wounded. Another man was injured in the Outin community. The occupiers carried out more than 50 attacks on 19 settlements in the region. They used artillery, multiple launch rocket systems, guided aerial bombs, as well as FPV drones and UAVs. There have been reports of destruction and damage to private and apartment buildings, civilian infrastructure facilities, and a number of vehicles. The most hits occurred in the Sumy and Shostka districts. In Shostka itself, the Russians destroyed the bus station with direct hits from several dozen kamikaze drones. A number of suburban trains will run from Konotop to Tereshchenska station and back, according to Ukrzaliznytsia.
At night, Russian forces destroyed the station building with direct hits from several dozen kamikaze drones and damaged the infrastructure of the railway station. The civilian station, from which hundreds of residents of the Sumy region set out on their peaceful business every day, became yet another target of the terrorist state. Fortunately, there were no casualties among the staff or passengers. During the attack, people were in shelters.
In Sumy itself, the occupiers struck 2 gas stations at once. Around 4 in the morning, an explosion occurred at a gas station in the Kovpakivsky district of the city. Preliminarily, the enemy struck with the Molnia UAV. One of the fuel dispensers burned down. The fire also destroyed the canopy. Fortunately, the staff who were at the gas station at the time of the strike were not injured. Another enemy UAV strike occurred near a gas station in the Zariknai district of the city. There, too, no one was injured.